We've been uncovering amazing remains of a Byzantine church complex. The church covers an area of about 1.5 dunums.
What if I told you that under centuries of mud and silence, a discovery has come to light that could reshape how we see the earliest days of Christianity? Not in Rome, not in theory, but in Galilee itself, the very place where it all began. Archaeologists digging near the Sea of Galilee recently uncovered what many are already calling one of the most important biblical finds of the century, the remains of a 500-year-old Byzantine church. And within its floor, preserved almost perfectly, lies a mosaic inscription. This inscription doesn't simply honor Peter as an apostle. It calls him the chief of the apostles and the holder of the keys of heaven. The language directly echoes Matthew 16 verse 19, where Jesus says to Peter, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." The find is extraordinary not only because of its condition, but because of the weight of its message. It touches one of the deepest debates in Christian history, the role of Peter, and what that meant for the leadership of the church. This isn't just an artifact, it's theology in stone. To understand the power of this discovery, we first need to revisit one of the enduring mysteries of biblical archaeology, the lost town of Bethsaida. John 1 verse 44 records it plainly. Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Bethsaida means house of the fishermen in Aramaic, and the name fits perfectly. It was here that fishermen would one day leave their nets to follow a teacher who changed the world. The Gospels tell us that Bethsaida was a place of miracles. It was there Jesus healed the blind man's Mark 8 verse 22. It was nearby that thousands were fed with loaves and fishes, Luke 9 verses 10 to 17. It was on those same waters that Jesus walked, and Peter stepped out to meet him. And yet, Bethsaida is also one of the few towns Jesus openly rebuked. In Matthew 11 verse 21 he declared, "Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago." After this curse, Bethsaida faded from the pages of history. For centuries, pilgrims, scholars, and locals argued about its true location. Was it inland, as some believed, or closer to the Sea of Galilee? For decades theories swirled, but hard evidence remained elusive. That all began to change in the modern era. In the late 19th and 20th centuries, scholars suggested two main candidates for Bethsaida. One was at Tel, a mound nearly 2 kilometers inland. The other, El Araj, sat much closer to the water's edge. The inland site had problems. A fishing town 2 kilometers from the water didn't make sense, and archaeologists struggled to find clear remains from the time of Jesus. Attention slowly shifted toward El Araj, especially after new surveys following the Six-Day War of 1967. Pottery shards, glass fragments, and mosaics hinted at a continuous settlement there, but the real breakthrough came in 2016. A team led by Professor Mordecai Aviam and Dr. Stephen Notley began large-scale excavations at El Araj. What they uncovered stunned even seasoned archaeologists, the ruins of a Byzantine church built over a Roman-era village. And at the heart of this church was the mosaic inscription. The mosaic is breathtaking in its preservation. The Greek lettering remains sharp, its message clear even after 400 years. Within a circular frame, the inscription reads, "By the zeal and devotion of Constantine, servant of Christ, this floor was paved in honor of the chief of the apostles and holder of the keys of heaven. Saint Peter, intercede for him and his children." This isn't vague symbolism. It names Peter as chief of the apostles. It refers to him directly as the holder of the keys. These aren't poetic flourishes. They are precise theological terms echoing Matthew 16 verse 19 and Isaiah 22 verse 22, where keys represent divine authority. And remember, this mosaic wasn't placed in Rome. It wasn't commissioned by medieval popes. It was written in Greek by Byzantine Christians in Galilee itself, within walking distance of the very waters where Peter once cast his nets. So why is this discovery shaking theologians? Because it provides physical, historical confirmation that early Christians in Galilee remembered Peter in a specific way, not simply as one apostle among many, but as the leader entrusted with special authority. For centuries, debates over Peter's role have divided Christians. Did Jesus give him unique authority, or was leadership shared equally among the apostles? Catholics have long pointed to Matthew verse 16 verse 19 as evidence of Peter's primacy. Protestants often counter by pointing to Matthew verse 18, where Jesus extends authority to all the apostles. This mosaic doesn't solve the debate entirely, but it adds a powerful new voice. It shows that Byzantine Christians, centuries before the Great Schism, saw Peter in a special light, and they inscribed that belief permanently in stone. The mosaic also connects powerfully with written records from the early church. In 725 AD, a Bavarian bishop named Willibald traveled through the Holy Land. He recorded visiting a church in Bethsaida dedicated to Peter and Andrew. For years, scholars doubted his account, dismissing it as legend. But now, with this mosaic, his description matches perfectly. The church he mentioned wasn't just pious imagination. It was real, and it was here at Il-Araj. The language of keys is especially significant. In the ancient world, keys symbolized stewardship and delegated royal authority. Isaiah verse 22 describes this vividly. I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. What he opens no one can shut, and what he shuts no one can open. When Jesus spoke to Peter in Matthew verse 16 verse 19, he wasn't just handing over a metaphor. He was bestowing a role, one that early Christians clearly remembered and honored. This doesn't prove the papacy as it exists today, but it does demonstrate that recognition of Peter's unique role wasn't a later Roman invention. It was part of Christian memory centuries earlier, and it was honored in both East and West. What makes this discovery so powerful is how it bridges archaeology and faith. Here we see not just stones and inscriptions, but the lived memory of a community that believed deeply in Peter's role. Archaeology doesn't tell us everything, but when text and tradition meet the soil, something remarkable happens. History becomes tangible. Faith takes on physical shape. The ruins of El-Araj remind us that Christianity didn't grow in abstraction. It grew in real villages, among real families, in places like Bethsaida. And the early church left behind markers, not just in scripture, but in stone and mosaic, carrying memory across generations. So what does this mean for us? At one level, it's a thrilling archaeological story, a lost town found, a mosaic unearthed, a mystery clarified. At another, it's a theological challenge. If early Christians so clearly remembered Peter as chief of the apostles, what do we do with that memory today? For some, it may confirm long-held convictions about authority and unity. For others, it may raise fresh questions. Either way, it invites reflection on what it means to belong to a church rooted in both scripture and history. What cannot be ignored is that this mosaic survived for 400 years, waiting for our generation to see it. Perhaps that in itself is a reminder that the truth of the gospel, like stone under soil, may be hidden for a time, but will always resurface. This discovery at El-Araj is more than an archaeological headline. It is a conversation across centuries between the early church and us. It tells us that memory matters, that places matter, and that Peter, the fisherman who became the rock, left a mark deeper than words alone. The stones are speaking. The question is, are we listening?